Garber. Great to see you, Ross. Thanks for coming in.
Good to see you.
So let's break this down. High crimes and misdemeanors. Did the president rise to that level yesterday?
So, yeah, the constitutional standard for impeachment is treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. And so, the question is, was what he did treason? And treason is actually defined in the Constitution. It's a rare offense in that way. It's actually defined, and the definition refers to aiding enemies. And so the question is Russia our enemy? And the answer is it may be an adversary, it may be a foe, it may even be a competitor, as the president said, but it's not an enemy. We are not at war with Russia. So technically, no, there was no treason that happened yesterday.
Why is it, when it comes to this standard, if you will, when you're talking about treason and high crimes and misdemeanors, why is the president's motivation key to these questions?
Well, so the reason why his motivation is going to be key is, so the standard for impeachment is treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. And high crimes and misdemeanors is actually not defined in the Constitution. It's not defined in the law anyplace. And you sort of have to look to historical context for what that means. And normally, the way that's been interpreted is some sort of egregious crime or similarly, very, very serious misconduct involving the office. And so what you have to look at is, what the president's done and what his motivations are. If what the president's doing is doing foreign policy the way he thinks it should be done, well, that's within the power of his office. If, on the other hand, he's doing something for some illegal or otherwise improper motive, well, that may be another issue. But so far, that hasn't been established.
But high crime and misdemeanor doesn't need to actually be a crime, though.
So you know what? There's actually a debate about that. I think most legal scholars would say technically it doesn't need to be a crime, but as a practical matter, given all of the crimes, all of the federal crimes that exist, it's unlikely that there'd be something that's so egregious, so terrible that should overthrow an election, which is what an impeachment is, that's not actually defined as a crime.
Why is there so much gray area around all of these questions? Because that is the only consistent thing I see when you talk to politicians about it or people on the street about it, when it comes to this president or any president and this issue.
Yeah, so, in our constitutional democracy, we elect presidents and we, sort of trust and let them do their jobs. And the only way that comes into question is if something, very, very serious is going on. You talk about impeachment. We've never removed the president from office, not once in our entire history. We've impeached two presidents, Clinton and Andrew Johnson, but they were acquitted in the Senate. So we've never removed a president. And so the way the system is set up is it's sort of based on a trust on the one hand, and then also allowing the political arms of our government, specifically Congress, to oversee the presidency as appropriate. And so right now there is a lot of ambiguity, but the Mueller investigation continues. The president's allowed that to happen, and Congress continues to do its investigation, and particularly on the Senate side, that investigation is bipartisan, and I think we'll have to see what that yields. But there are certainly questions.
Certainly questions, and it would also come down to a question of political will when it comes to trying to impeach the president. That comes down to the political will of Congress, and we see where that is, at least at the moment. Great to see you, Ross. I appreciate it.
It's good to see you.
Thank you. What exactly do we know about this?
Well, Kate, this is basically right out of a spy novel, what we know about this woman, Maria Butina. She's 29. She's a Russian national. She was arrested here in Washington, D.C. And as you pointed out, she was basically cultivating this years-long effort with the help of a man named Alexander Torshin, who is a former Russian politician, a Kremlin-linked banker. And what they were trying to do is they were trying to build inroads into the Republican Party, into political organizations here in the United States to try to promote Russian interests. And And one of the ways that she did this, along with Torshin, was to build inroads into the National Rifle Association and to use that as sort of a conduit in order to meet political leaders, in order to meet business leaders, and even in order to meet American political candidates. And as you pointed out, at one point, she was working along with Torshin to try to establish some kind of back channel of communication between then candidate Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, although it does not appear that they were successful.
And Sarah, it seems that there could be more to this. Could there be more people involved?
Well, there certainly could. And look, Maria Butina's lawyer insists that she was not a Russian agent. She was just a student here. But we know that there are documents related to this case that remain sealed. There are 2 unnamed Americans listed in the charging documents involving Maria Butina. And charges have not been brought against Alexander Torshin either. So it's possible we could see more on the front of the Russian Alexander Torshin. But it's also possible we could see some Americans named in this, although as of right now, no Americans have been accused of doing anything wrong.
Okay, great to see you, Sarah. Thanks so much. Much more to come on that. Coming up for us, former President Barack Obama speaking out in South Africa just moments ago and making some comments that hit much, much closer to home. The tape's just in. Strange times, uncertain times, and head-spinning and disturbing headlines, but also hitting even closer to home. Listen.
Unfortunately, too much of politics today seems to reject the very concept of objective truth. People just make stuff up. They just make stuff up. We see it in the growth of state-sponsored propaganda. We see it in internet-driven fabrications. We see it in the blurring of lines between news and entertainment. We see the utter loss of shame among political leaders where they're caught in a lie and they just double down and they lie some more. Look, let me say, politicians have always lied, but it used to be if you caught them lying, they'd be like, oh man. Now they just keep on lying. They just...
As we often say as we end the show, you just can't make this stuff up, even though sometimes they are, a lot of the time. Thanks so much for joining me. Inside Politics with John King starts right now.
Thank you, Kate, and welcome to Inside Politics. I'm John King. Thank you for sharing your day with us. President Trump said to be surprised and furious today, unhappy as he hears bipartisan and global outrage over his weak summit performance in Helsinki. The Kremlin is thrilled, emboldened by the president's embrace of Vladimir Putin and the fact that not once did Mr. Trump publicly criticize Russian election meddling or Russia's global aggression. Much of the criticism is about how the president undermined the United States or undermined the NATO alliance. Some of it, though, more personal.
President Trump, I just saw your press conference with President Putin, and it was embarrassing. I mean, you stood there like a little wet noodle, like a little fanboy. I mean, I was asking myself, when are you going to ask him for an autograph or for a selfie or something like that?
We begin there with the president back here in Washington and the mounting negative summit fallout. The president, again, said to be angry, unconvinced of what is plain to most lawmakers on Capitol Hill, that the commander-in-chief folded in front of Vladimir Putin and embarrassed himself, his political party, and the United States on the global stage. This is the Republican Speaker of the House about 90 minutes ago leading the chorus of Republicans, saying the president's embrace of Putin and the president's assault on U.S. intelligence agencies was dead wrong.
We just conducted a year-long investigation into Russia's interference in our elections. They did interfere in our elections. It's really clear.
President Trump was wrong yesterday in a major way, and I think it was a very embarrassing press conference. You cannot cut deals with the devil, and you can never trust Russia.
You could say it's embarrassing, but I don't think that does it sufficient justice. I think it undermines our moral authority.
I've seen the Russian intelligence and manipulate many people in my career, and I never would have thought the U.S. president would be one of them.
How can we ask Poland, Romania, Hungary to stand up to Russia meddling in their own countries if the president of the United States, leader of the free world, can't do it?
Sources tell CNN the president actually walked off the Helsinki summit stage happy, but his mood quickly soured on Air Force One, spoiled as he began to soak in the fierce criticism, including criticism from normally reliable Republican allies. Today, the president embracing one of the few GOP voices providing him cover. This tweet this morning: "Thank you, Rand Paul." Now, the president, despite enough evidence to fill a football arena, says he sees no reason that Russia would have meddled in the 2016 election. Senator Paul is more of the who cares view.
Any country that can spy does, and any country that can meddle in foreign elections does. All countries are doing this, but
he is pushing him to say something different, and he is completely stubborn.
Some of Director Coates' friends are saying you should resign. Some of the former people who hold those jobs have said you should resign. There are newspaper editorials back home. John Huntsman, the ambassador to Russia, should resign. I just want to